There are those who believe they came after the pollution people caused. And they're here to cleanse the planet of the human race. So we'll all become extinct. We have to stay vigilant. Do you understand?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll meet you right here before the sun sets behind that hill.
It was good to see you.
You're late! Sorry, I lost track of time.
Are we safe?
Yes.
Are we secure?
Yes. Thank you for this food we are about to receive. Thank you for bringing us together as a family. I don't want to hide from them anymore. What do we do?
Are we not men?
What are they doing?
They trapped us in.
They're coming up from underneath us.
They'll break in any second. You didn't trust me.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. It's Mike, and joining me as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, doomsday preppers. Yeah, I'm doing all right. How the hell are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing pretty good. It's full-on summer weather here now, but I did start a new position at work, which I'm liking a lot better at the moment than what I was doing before. So things are looking up for me. But other than that, same old, same old. Also with us, it's Dawn and Ellie. What's up, Dawn?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
All right. Well, we had a little break in the theatrical releases. So, interesting enough, this one actually kind of was a limited theatrical release, and it came out probably on the worst weekend possible, because from what I remember, it's been a few weeks now, but I want to say there was two other horror releases that same week, and this one kind of got that like experimental, we'll give it a chance slot, where at least in my city, Venom, I'm assuming, probably got more screenings than me, but I kind of got the one weekend, if you can make it to like either I think a 7 p.m. or a 10 p.m. showing, and then after the weekend it was gone. So the window was tight, plus like I said, a couple of the releases, so it kind of got I wouldn't say overlooked, just kind of deprioritized. And that would be Arcadian. I think the major probably draw to this one is Nick Cage. He at this stage of his career, he's been taking all sorts of roles in different kinds of movies, and it's a horror movie, it's a Nick Cage movie, so hey, it seemed like one that even if we couldn't get to the theater, we would eventually give it a chance, whether it was for fresh cuts or just talk about it on the main show. But as the roll of the dice goes, we ended up covering for fresh cuts after all. So I will take the synopsis off IMDb. A father and his twin teenage sons fight to survive in a remote farmhouse at the end of the world. All right, that's kind of vague-ish, but that's not all that bad for a synopsis, I guess. It sets it up okay. So we'll start with our general thoughts on Arcadian. Venom, you're up first. What did you think of the movie?
Oh man, I had a very interesting experience watching this movie. I just found this movie to be incredibly frustrating. I have a lot of problems with this movie, and I may not even get to all of them in the course of this episode, but I don't even know where to start. I mean, the movie is only 92 minutes long. It's a solid hour and a half, and they spend an entire half hour on world building and character development. And I was just so bored by the end of the first act before we ever see any antagonist of any kind. It just, oh God, it's just a lot. Okay, next. I hated the brothers in this movie. I fucking hated them with a passion. And you know why I hated them? Because their characterization doesn't make any sense. They are both between 15 and 16 years old, approximately. They've lived their entire life in this post-apocalyptic world. Literally, they were babies at the beginning of the movie. And they still act like entitled fucking brats. It doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no sense of self-preservation, no constant concern about, you know, what do we do tonight, you know, when they come, blah, blah, blah. It just didn't feel real. Like, if you're a 15-year-old kid who lived your entire life in a post-apocalyptic world, you're the equivalent of a 30-year-old in the normal world, okay? Like, there's no way that these two kids would get this petty, this entitled, and this just shitty. Like, they just, it's like they don't care about each other. They squabble like normal siblings would. But when I say normal, I mean in a normal world where they get to live in a world with a mom and a dad and they go to school and they have friends. That's different. In this movie, they live their entire life in this apocalypse, yet they're still these entitled, shitty teenagers, and I fucking hated them. Every time either one of them was on screen, I just checked out instantly. And guess what? They're the majority of the fucking film, because Nick Cage is missing for a good 30 to 40 minutes of this movie. You know, I mean, he is definitely the top billed star here, and he deserves it because, you know, this isn't a cameo by any stretch. It's a full-on role for Nick Cage, but he literally disappears for half the movie. Not disappears. We know where he is, but he's just not on screen. So we're spending all of this time with these two brothers who I just can't fucking stand. And then one of the brothers is concerned. He's worried about getting his dick wet. Are you fucking serious? We're in the middle of a post-apocalyptic nightmare, and you're risking your life to go see some girl on an adjacent farm while abandoning your own responsibilities to your father and your brother and your own farm? So much of this movie just didn't fucking make sense. It's so frustrating and annoying. The fact that Nick Cage had to discipline these boys at all in this movie just makes zero sense to me. Like I said, and I'm not speaking from experience, but I can't imagine a world where two 15-year-old boys live their whole life in this apocalyptic nightmare, but still act like entitled American teenagers. It just doesn't fucking make sense. So enough of that point for now. Next, this is not a horror film in any way, shape, or form. Yes, there are monsters. Yes, people die at the hands of those monsters. But this is not a fucking horror movie. This is solidly a family drama. This is a drama that has some horror elements to it, you know? And that's exactly what it is. You spend all of this time with these families that I barely give a shit about. I can't wait to hear Don's general thoughts on this. I can't imagine Don gave a rat's ass about anyone in this goddamn movie, because I barely did. The creature action is few and far between. Like I said, I won't even call this a creature feature. Don and I are both on Creature Comforts, a creature feature podcast, and I'm not going to speak for Don, but for me, this ain't a creature feature. I'm sorry. Yes, there's creatures in it. Doesn't make it a creature feature in my book, because the monsters are not the focus of anything in this movie. Another thing about the movie that I don't like, there's no arc to this movie. You know, the movie has a beginning and some of a middle, but it has no end. Like, once we actually get to the walkthrough, I'll be able to explain more about, you know, what's happening, why I feel like there's no arc in this movie, but there really is no arc, and it just annoys me. Like I said, I have countless issues with this movie. It's not objectively a bad film. I do want to make that point. Some people might say that, but as far as my personal opinion, it's not an objectively bad film. It's well shot. It looks okay. The performances are fine. The writing is there. I don't want to say that it's particularly good. It's just kind of there. Cinematography is okay. Score is okay. Like, it looks like a movie. It definitely looks like somebody put some money into this thing and, took some care with it. But ultimately, this is a horror movie podcast, horror, thriller, whatever you want to go with. I can't even call this movie a thriller because I found myself so goddamn bored with the family drama constantly. Like, I just wanted to know, can we get back to the monsters? Can we? I mean, is that possible? And then by the end of the movie, we don't learn fucking shit about them. Literally, like, the movie is so ambiguous. I don't know if this director thought he was being clever with all the ambiguity, but I'm sorry, my friend. What's his name? Benjamin Brewer. No, you're not being clever. You're being lazy because you don't want to come up with a backstory to these creatures. You don't want to tell us, you give us that cold open that doesn't really explain much of anything. We kind of have to put the pieces together ourselves as the viewer. So we know nothing about these creatures by the end of the movie, what they are, where they come from. Literally, it's really just the story of this family, this, Cage and his two sons. And I use sons in quotations because I don't believe these are his blood children. Again, when we get to the walkthrough, I'll talk more about that. But ultimately, I can say these boys don't look alike. They have different color hair. They're different heights. They have different personalities. Even though they were raised together, they somehow have very drastic different personalities. So like I said, I don't think they're actually his blood children, but I'll get into my theory on that when we get to the walkthrough. Like I said, I just found myself thoroughly bored throughout the majority of this film. I didn't care about any of the characters. Once I saw that the brothers were just entitled douchey teenagers, I lost interest in them. And then the only character in the movie that I actually might show interest in disappears for 40 fucking minutes of a 90-minute movie. So, yeah, this movie is very, very lacking. There needs to be more to this. Now, I've read reviews where people really enjoy this movie, and that's fine. Like I said, I'm not saying that it is a bad movie. It's just a movie that you need to be prepared for. Since I don't watch trailers, all I knew about this is that it's a creature feature. But when I was done with it, I'm like, I did not just watch a creature feature. I watched a family drama that had a couple of monsters in it, and that's it. And I will say there was one cool thing about the aliens. All I'm going to say is critter ball, my friends, critter ball. And I know Mike knows what I'm fucking talking about. So I'm going to leave my general thoughts at that and say I can't recommend this movie to hardcore horror fans. If you're a Nick Cage completionist, then obviously you're going to watch it. If you're a big fan of Nick Cage, I don't know that this is like a vital Nick Cage movie that has to be watched. I mean, we don't even get any Rage Cage. And mind you, I don't need Rage Cage in every single Nicolas Cage movie, but this movie fucking needed it. This movie needed Nick to just blow up on these aliens, or even on his sons, for that matter, since they fucking deserved it.
I was going to say his sons were more deserving.
Exactly. So yeah, like I said, I'm just going to leave it. I can't really recommend this to any horror fans. Even if you're a big creature feature lover, I just can't really recommend it. I feel like it's going to disappoint you by the time you get to the end. And like I said, I just found myself bored, frustrated, and pissed off at these two brothers and their characterization. It just doesn't make any sense that they would act like this after living their entire lives in this world. So I'm going to leave it at that and say I did not enjoy this movie. Back to you, Mike.
All right, back to me, but back to Dawn. What were your thoughts on Arcadian?
2024, we hardly knew ye. We're back at this. We're back to the usual round of crap that we've been subjected to for what seems like the majority of the year. Before we get started, I will say this. Whoever the cinematographer is in this movie, my friends, you do not have a good day. You do not have a good job. Please go back to a normal one. The majority of this movie, I could not find a single frame of this film that sat still. I'm kind of confused on Venom's comment about this looking good because this thing reminded me of exactly the reason why we stopped trying to believe Matt Damon is a martial arts expert. it reminded me of a lot of that late 2000s, early 2010s, just rapid cut action movies that were just being pumped out, and it was just frustrating and annoying and just irritating to sit through. The thing just bounced like crazy, especially during the creature action, which just pissed me off to no end because they're so few and far between, like Venom said, that I want to be able to tell what they are. And I watched this movie about an hour before we started this show, just because I got an early shift at work. And I normally watch the movie before I go to work, but this time I had to watch the movie after. I can give you a description of what the damn things look like. I literally watched this movie an hour before, and I can't tell what the damn things look like. Yeah, you expect me to give you a backstory on them? Please, you're funny. I don't know anything about these creatures. I don't know anything about where they're from, what they're about. I know a lot of people have said that this is akin to A Quiet Place. No. Please, my friends, stop drinking. Stop drinking, and that, learn the difference between quality filmmaking. A post-apocalyptic setting with monsters, okay. I mean, that's a flimsy pretext, but there's very little similarity here because at least in A Quiet Place, we know something about the monsters. We know why it has to be called A Quiet Place because of the monsters. And I think that's the big difference here. Like I said, I can't tell you what they're about. I can't tell you what they look like. I can't tell you anything about them other than I think I would probably say they're like brownish black blobs of some kinds. And I mean, they happen so infrequently that it's really hard to tell. And then it bounces along like crazy when they do show up. So it's really just a crapshoot what they're like. And that brings up to the other part of the film where they're so infrequent simply because the film is not a horror movie. I'm spot on with Venom on this. I mean, this thing has so little creature action. It's mainly because it's a family drama. And not giving a crap about the family is putting it lightly. I wanted these entitled cocksuckers to feel the full fury of the creatures from the second they started spewing their entitled bullshit. I mean, it's just absolutely unfathomable. Like Venom said, how a group of people in this kind of a community where they said it's been 15 years. So based on the cold open, they're 15 years and 6-7 months, maybe even 6-7 weeks. I can't tell. I mean, it's been a while since I've been around a baby, so I have very little frame of reference what they look like. But I mean, 15 years and anywhere from 2 to 7 months, you have this kind of a behavior in this kind of a situation. No, you don't. You're like a survivalist. You live off the land. You know how to hunt. You know how to track. You know how to be resourceful. You don't have this silver spoon, grubby, elitist attitude in any kind of scenario, and you can't tell me otherwise. There's no way that this kind of a behavior would even be tolerated. Rage cage and to try to make the kids into some kind of responsible adults would have actually made this movie enjoyable. But yeah, I can't agree enough on what Venom said. And yeah, the film is just bland. It's dull. The story's just not that interesting. There's nothing here to grab onto. The creature action is so blurry and hard to see. You can't get any enjoyment from them. And so little about them at the end that it's almost impossible to really care. I mean, calling this thing a film for cage completists would probably be the only way I could recommend this, but anybody looking for a horror movie is gonna be better served looking elsewhere. I mean, there's better stuff out there, more genuine, dried in the wool kind of genre fare that even if it's not good, I'd probably recommend, just because, they're genuine genre fare. Whatever the hell this thing is, it's not really worth your time. Yeah, I gotta say this was an absolute dumpster fire, and there's nothing here for this one. So at the end of spending an hour railing against this one when we've got other things to do, I'll stop it here and say back to you, Mike.
Okay. Yeah, not too big of a fan of this one either. I don't really have much to add. The story wasn't interesting. I mean, I guess the setup was okay. It was like your typical end of the world apocalypse or something. Whatever happened. I have the other problem I have is like these creatures don't seem like that hard to kill. Because
exactly.
So I'm like, I don't know how these creatures led to the end of the world. At least with A Quiet Place, like what we learned, and not to spoil all of A Quiet Place, but it's been out. So at least there's a reason why they're such a formidable beast, because until they figure out their one weakness, they're pretty impenetrable. Like conventional weapons aren't working. But in this movie, pretty much when it comes down to the confrontation, like they're killing them with like their standard weapons. So maybe we're supposed to believe that there was such a mass amount of them at one point that they just overwhelmed everyone. But at the state of where we're at now,
it had to have been
not the case.
It had to have been a massive amount, or maybe just surprise ambushes. I mean, there's got to be very little. It's probably going to be one or the other, but I mean, it's either just overwhelming numbers or just attacking when you least suspect them.
Yeah, I mean, I threw it on a second time because I was like, maybe there was some dialogue I missed where they alluded to like when this all started and went down, but there really wasn't. So I guess we just have to believe that people are overwhelmed and surprised. Yet we see them taking them out with like an axe or like a typical shotgun or something. So I'm like, okay. The creature design, yeah, I don't know what the hell they were going for. I think this is actually, I was joking to myself, this is like A Quiet Place on a quiet budget, but even that's giving it too much credit, because I think this almost benefits when the creatures are in the dark, because as soon as like you try to get a good look at them, they look like a Jim Henson Muppet, but just painted like dark. Like, and there's this thing that they do, like I won't even get into the details. I guess it's supposed to be scary, but it just made me laugh, and it made me it made me think of them even more as Muppets when they did that thing. What else? Yeah, there's not much development in the characters here. There's not much of an arc. It's like they're little assholes at the beginning of the movie and not much different at the end. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if this is a case where this script just came across Nick Cage's desk and he just saw it and was like, okay, I'll do it, because like I don't know what you need him for.
Yeah, his agent's the writer. The writer is his agent.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe it was a favor or something, or maybe he's like, he bored for like a month. Come film this. Yeah, and like I agree. It's like we don't get a lot of creature action in this. It's mostly just drama, and I feel like there's no reason for the sons to be acting the way they are. Like Venom alluded to, they fully grew up in this post-apocalyptic world, so like it's not like a case of like you're watching The Walking Dead where day one happens and you have that first generation that isn't accustomed to the new world. They're still acting like the world is the same. These kids never knew a world before these creatures, I guess, according to like the timeline. So it's like, yes, siblings will always squabble to a certain amount, but they act very careless and reckless. What else? Yeah, it's just not very interesting, like the story. Like, everyone's comparing it to Quiet Place, but at least with A Quiet Place, like there was a family dynamic, there was good writing, the characters were well done, there was arcs in the characters. Like they didn't feel like they were in the same place at the beginning as they were at the end, and it felt justified. I mean, I guess you could say in this case that like there's there's a thing that Nick Cage's character does at the almost end of the movie to signify maybe he views his sons in a different state of mind or capability, so he does something. But like other than that, it's just like everyone feels the same. I guess the fact that it's like barely like a minute over 90 minutes or a minute or two over 90 minutes, that maybe could be a saving. Like, not, I wouldn't even call it a saving grace, but at least a good thing that it's quick, like a quicker watch. You know, they're not having you hang on to the slow plotting story for 2 hours. So that's something. But yeah, I mean, unless you're a 2024 completist, I don't see the need to track this down. Or like I think Venom said, or I can't remember if it was Venom or Dawn, with the, like Nick Cage thing. If you just want to watch everything Nick Cage is in, yeah, I guess do it for that reason. But man, it was kind of a slog to get through. I just think they did a lot of wrong things in a movie like this. If you're gonna make a creature feature, especially on a lower budget, you got to get some more like action in there, like make it more entertaining. Obviously, we understand your limitations. If your budget is a certain amount, you know, obviously things aren't gonna look as good as A Quiet Place, but you know, you're still professionals at this level. This isn't like micro budget, so it's like you got to figure out ways to work around that. And for God's sake, do not make them look like Muppets. I'm sorry. That didn't help the cause. That as soon as I got a good look at them, I was just more chuckling than anything else. But yeah. Other than that, I just echo everything that's already been said. Very disappointed. I mean, now it turns out maybe it wasn't such a bad thing I wasn't able to see in the theater. So yeah, with that said, I'll turn it back over to Venom.
Yeah, by the end of the movie, I was calling these things giraffe aliens, because by the end of the movie, some of them had these elongated necks. Now, I know they didn't always look like that. These creatures have this ability to be able to extend their limbs, which is shown actually fairly well. Yeah, oh, that was his arm. Yeah, I thought it was his penis at first.
I didn't know what the hell that was. That was his arm?
That was an arm, yeah, and it kept unfolding and unfolding. I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at? Because that's the first time we see anything. Yeah, that scene is literally the first time we see anything, and I literally sat up on the edge of my couch and I'm staring at my screen like, what the fuck is that? And then finally, when a hand appeared at the end, I'm like, oh, it's an arm. Okay, cool. I just, yeah, this fucking movie, man. And yeah, that thing that they were doing, holy shit. Like, I think I found it cool the very, very first time, just because it was different. It's just something that we hadn't seen before. And then by the 8th time that we saw it, I'm right there with Mike. I'm laughing. I'm literally laughing every time they do it, because it's obviously a display of aggression or a display of like dominance or whatever, but it just comes off as like Mike said, like a Muppet gone wild. It's so laughably stupid. And yes, they are so easy to kill. Literally, the very first one that dies in the movie, Nick Cage literally grabs it from behind while it's attacking his son, throws it to the ground, and just stabs it with a pocket knife. Not even a buck knife or something big. Literally, it's a pocket knife. He stabs it a couple of times and it dies. I'm like, that's what's taken over the world? Really? What the fuck? I mean, there were scenes in this movie where there were more than one of the creatures, and it still didn't seem like the humans were really having all that much trouble dealing with them. At least the main humans. There is an ambush scene later in the film with another group of people that's just ridiculous, but we'll get to that eventually. Man, yeah, I like I said, the reason I said I mildly enjoyed the cinematography is that there is a shot at the very start of the movie, right after Nick Cage gets out of the city, where it's a long shot, and we see the city in the background basically on fire, just smoking, and Nick Cage is just this little speck at the center of the screen on the bottom. So it's like a very, very wide shot. I remember thinking that was a cool shot, and I think that shot sold me on the cinematographer for the rest of the film, even though nothing really the rest of the way. And I do agree with Don on the shaky cam. the scene, I guess this isn't much of a spoiler, but the scene where one of the brothers falls into that cave, the shaky cam was annoying the shit out of me during that scene. That was the only scene where the shaky cam was annoying me. I guess I'm a little bit more accepting of it. But yeah, that scene in particular just irked the shit out of me. And then later in the movie, there's a shot that just freezes. Did you guys notice that when the kids jump into the refrigerator? Literally, the screen freezes. I'm like, is this suddenly a found footage movie? What the fuck is going on?
No, the quality of mine was kind of buffering, like maybe a couple of times beforehand. So I kind of just figured it was just my internet catching up.
I hear you. No, totally. It's not a very good looking movie, though. I mean, you are correct. Yeah. Despite it all,
no,
I
was just saying, I chalked it up just because I had my version buffered like maybe once or twice, so it wasn't like it was just an unnatural thing. It had happened once or twice, so I just chalked it up to that. But that was intentional.
It had to be because because the audio didn't freeze, just the picture. And I'm like, well, what is going on? Did the movie suddenly become a found footage movie and the camera stuck? And it's like, nope, it just freezes there for like 5 seconds, and then the kids come out of the fridge, and it's like, what the fuck am I watching? I'm sorry, Benjamin Brewer, but yeah, you need some work, my friend. You know, a good effort, I guess. I mean, I don't even want acceptable effort. Let's go with that. But man, you need some work, my friend. You need a better cinematographer, definitely. And you need better lighting. But this is a post-apocalyptic world where, you know, there is no electricity. So again, maybe the dark lighting was intentional, you know, meant to just show how dark this whole world is. Even in the middle of the day, though, it felt dark too. So, you know, whatever. But yeah, I think that's about all spoiler-free that we can really get into. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we get into the walkthrough?
I will say this, for your comment about them being twins, it probably would have helped if they had actually cast genuine twins for the boys.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, I don't think they're related at all. I don't know if that was intentional by the filmmaker that they're like I said, I'll get into it during the walkthrough. But yeah, I don't think these boys were blood relation, and I don't think they were blood relation to Nick Cage. But you know, again, if the movie would have pointed it out to us a little bit easier and made it easier to understand, rather than plugging in our own facts to fill in the holes, the plot holes that this director left in here, writer and director. I don't want to just blame the director. Definitely more the writer. But yeah, just holes all over this freaking movie. Anyway, that's going to be your final spoiler warning, folks. If you haven't seen Arcadian and actually care to watch it, go ahead and pause the show. Go check it out. Come back in 92 minutes and find out a little bit more detailed on what we thought about it. Otherwise, if you don't care or you've already seen it, go ahead and stick around. So, our movie opens up with Nick Cage. We don't know it's him right away, but eventually he does turn around and face the camera and show that it's him. Basically, it shows him packing a bag, almost like a one of those get out bags, you know, like you gotta that you have prepared, you know, kind of like I mentioned Doomsday Preppers earlier. It just felt like it was his get bag, you know. So he's packing a bag, like a big old book bag, and we see him running out of a building with a dead body laying in front of the building. It's the middle of the day, by the way. It is not nighttime. It is daytime. Now, while he's running out of the city, we hear gunshots. We hear, you know, assault weapons. We hear explosions. It literally sounds like the city is under siege, like there's a war going on, like, you know, a hostile force is taken over. But as he's running through the city, they're not really showing us anything. They're not showing us any other people fighting, what they're fighting. You know, is it the military? Is it civilians? I mean, literally, we see Nick Cage in this scene and Nick Cage only running through this city. Finally, he gets out of the city and he goes into this abandoned building where apparently he had two babies kind of hidden in there. Now, my theory is that if these are his actual children, like I said, I already talked about the fact that they don't look alike. They don't act alike, and neither one of them, you know, even remotely looks like Nicolas Cage. What I'm thinking is that Cage, during the initial siege, probably ran into these babies. Maybe their parents had already been killed, and they were just, you know, laying alone in a crib, unmonitored by anyone, and just decided for the sake of saving their lives, he'll take them. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that these are rescues. I hate to use the term rescue because it's usually used more for pets, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking these two babies are basically rescues by Nick Cage.
That's what I assume too. Like he found them, or they got dumped on him, or like something, because they're obviously not twins.
Exactly. So yeah. All right. So after that scene, we get our title card, and then the movie jumps forward 15 years, 15 years ahead into the future. And what we see is Nick Cage living on a farm with these two boys. And what we see is one of the boys isn't home, and the sun is starting to go down, and we see Nick Cage kind of at the edge of his farm, staring, very concerned, a very concerned look on his face, wondering where his other son is. Finally, he comes running across the horizon, and they all together run into the house. I mean run. They're racing the sunset, basically. They finally all get into their house, and they start hunkering down. They're locking all the doors, locking all the windows, putting up security devices like, bars and whatnot, blah, 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 blah. And then finally, while we get a scene where they sit down for dinner, and of course the boys act like a couple of douchebags. They disagree on something, and they slap each other around, blah, blah, blah. But during the dinner, something attacks their front door. We don't see what, obviously, because we're inside the house, but basically Nick and one of the boys goes to the door that's being attacked, and they sit there and just kind of hold it closed to make sure that nothing can get in. We hear scratching, we hear clawing, we hear the occasional like growl type sound, almost werewolf like. Honestly, like it almost, like, obviously at this point in the movie, as the viewer, you're trying to figure out, okay, are these aliens? Are they werewolves? Are they zombies? Like, what exactly is attacking, or what caused this apocalypse? Blah, blah, blah. Is it a virus or something like that? So eventually the attack ends, and everything goes back to normal. Everything's quiet, and then we see that one of the brothers, and shit, what were the brothers' names? The brothers' names were Thomas. Thomas is the major douchebag, and then Joseph is the mild douchebag. He's the one who actually seems to actually care about the farm and his father, and protecting the family and everything that they own. Whereas Thomas is the one who's just, his head is somewhere else always. He's either thinking about a girl that he knows from another property, or he's thinking about leaving the farm. Like, his head is never where it's supposed to be. He's a very irresponsible kid. Eventually we find out that Thomas has been going to this farm they never tell us exactly how far away it is from his farm, but it does look like it's a fairly long run. Because they basically run back and forth all the time, like I said, trying to beat the sunset to get home before the sun goes down. We find out that there's another family living on this farm. They've got some people, some farm hands that, kind of survivors that joined them there on the farm. And the family has a teenage daughter who's around the same age as Thomas. And of course, we get multiple scenes of Thomas pitching woo to this girl, if you will. Just very, very boring scenes that I didn't give a rat's ass about. Because the whole time I'm screaming, why the hell do you care about getting laid in this apocalypse? For fuck's sake, that is not your priority. Getting laid is not the priority during a goddamn apocalypse. It's survival. And survival seemed to be the last thing on this kid's mind throughout the majority of this film. Not until the shit hit the fan did he finally actually start caring. But anyway, I digress. What ends up happening is the next day, the Thomas wants to go back to the farm, but there's chores to be done. There's always things that need to be done. So he basically ends up telling the boys that he needs them to take the truck, and they have this little like makeshift dune buggy type thing that they call the truck. And I'm assuming it's electric, because where the hell are they getting gasoline 15 years after the apocalypse started? So I'm assuming it's electric. Or maybe they figured out a way for it to run on corn or something, whatever it is they're growing on their farm. Let's see. So the next day, like I said, Nick Cage assigns them with a task to go to a freighter at the edge of the water. So they live close enough to the ocean. So I'm assuming this is either California or maybe something back east, but they live close enough to the ocean that they could go there. And there's a big old freighter there, a big old cargo ship that's down in the water. Like part of it is under the water. So they basically periodically they will go there and they'll salvage supplies out of it, food, clothing, whatever they can muster out of it. So one day, Nick, like I said, Nick sends his 2 boys to go there. The boys on the way there end up getting into a petty argument again about Thomas not having his head on straight and not, blah, blah, blah. And then he basically, Thomas accuses his brother of being the reason why he has to watch his brother. And it's funny, too, because Joseph looks at him as like, wait, you're watching me? What? Like this kid, Thomas, is literally so deluded. He doesn't even understand how fucking selfish he is. Yeah, he's literally Donald Trump. He doesn't realize how much of a piece of shit he actually is. Like I said, until the shit hits the fan later on. So they get into an argument. Thomas ends up getting out of the truck and going to the other farm to see his little girlfriend. Joseph ends up continuing to the freighter to pick up some supplies by himself. While in the freighter, he gets attacked by just a swarm of flying insects. I think they're roaches, just the big ass flying roaches that you would see like in Florida or Puerto Rico or whatever. And, they literally, a swarm of them come out. And I'm starting to think, oh, shit, is this like an insect movie or something? But no, he just gets out of the freighter, no harm, no foul, just basically wasn't able to find anything to salvage on the ship. So while he's on the ship, Thomas is at the farm with his little girlfriend. Her name is Charlotte. And, they're talking, blah, blah, blah. He's trying to get, close to her. And finally, they have kind of a little sweet scene where just before he leaves, she wants to hug him for 10 seconds, a full 10-second hug. They do their full 10-second hug, but then as soon as the hug is over, Thomas realizes, oh shit, sun's coming down. I might be late because he has to meet his brother at the spot where he got out of the truck so that they can go home together, so that dad doesn't know that they, went their separate ways during their errand. So he's running, trying to get back. Eventually, he ends up tripping on a rock and falling into like a crevasse, basically, that leads down into a underground cave. He falls down there and loses consciousness. So, we go back to where Joseph is waiting for him at the spot with the truck, and he doesn't show up, and the sun is almost down. So he's like, I got to go. I got to get home. He ends up going home, arriving home without his brother. Nick is there, and he's like, where's your brother? The brother acts surprised, like, oh, he's not here already? I thought he would be here. We he ended up going to the farm, before I made it to the freighter, blah, blah, blah. Nick Cage realizes his boy is done for if he's stuck out in the open by himself without protection. So Nick Cage decides to, pack up a bag, take the dog. They do have a dog in the family who actually survives the movie. Rock on. Pets don't usually survive. So I was very happy to see that, at least. One good point for this movie. Anyway, Nick Cage goes out and decides to look for his son. Eventually, Thomas wakes up at the bottom of the crevasse, inside of the cave system. He doesn't know where he is. He has like a makeshift sparkler type thing that creates light for him that doesn't need fuel. It's just like a little pump thing. And he keeps pumping it to, create light sparks so that he can see. Eventually he sees a hand, a very large, ultra clawed hand. Like the hand has like, I don't know, I want to say 4 to 6 inch claws on every finger. This thing looks gnarly. Eventually, he ends up stabbing it in the hand, but then he ends up getting attacked by the creature. At that exact moment, though, is when Nick Cage shows up and literally just grabs the creature by the shoulder, pulls it off of his son, and then just stabs it a couple of times with a pocket knife, and that's it. It dies. So, we've already established that these are incredibly weak creatures, but obviously, like ants, they probably have the advantage in numbers, even though it's not really shown to us or said in the film that they had superior numbers, but we can make that assumption like we talked about earlier. It's been 15 years, so if these things, considering how easy they are to kill, if they haven't been eradicated off the planet by now, it's probably because they're like roaches, it's just massive numbers. So Nick and Thomas decide to stay in the cave for the night. They're like, well, the sun's already down. There's no way we're going to make it home without getting attacked multiple times. So let's just go ahead and stay right here. They decide to block off the only entrance to the cave in the part of the cave that they're in right now. They're not in the same part where Thomas fell in. They're in a different part that just has a single entrance, and then they block it off. Eventually, creatures start attacking the barricade that they set up, but then at the same time, a hole starts to, like a sinkhole, starts to develop in the middle of the cave, right in the middle of the room, and it looks like it's getting bigger. It almost looks like it's going to engulf everything. Like everything in that cave is going to fall through this sinkhole. Eventually, the sinkhole is just getting bigger and bigger. Eventually, Nick takes like an aerosol can and turns it into like a makeshift grenade where he puts it up against the sinkhole, and then he detonates it, himself by just smashing it. He detonates it, it explodes, and we don't know what happens. At this point, we go back to the house now where Joseph is by himself. And Joseph is by himself. We see him lock up the house, hunker down the house. But then when he goes to close like the peephole, I say peephole, but it's more like a little window, like a porthole on a ship, But it's got like a little sliding piece of wood on it to block it off with a little latch to lock it. When we see Joseph close that sliding door, we see that the latch doesn't catch. He didn't do it completely. And then he just falls asleep in the living room. He literally puts up a chair right in front of the door and just falls asleep right there. Now, finally, this is where we start to see our creatures. And what we hear, we don't actually see it, but what we hear is the little sliding thing open where the porthole in the door is. We hear it slide open. The camera is at an angle where it's not actually showing the door. It's showing the kid sleeping in the chair. Then we see some kind of like nub come through the hole. Like I said, it looked like a penis at first. I knew it couldn't have been a penis. Why the hell would an alien stick his penis in there? But it just kind of looked like one. Then suddenly it starts to unfold. Literally, like it unfolds and doubles in length. And then it unfolds again and exposes a clawed hand at the end. At this point, this thing is about 8 to 9 feet long. Then it points at the boy. We see it take one of its fingers. All we see is the arm at this point. We still don't see any of the body of the creature. We see it point at the boy, and then suddenly the claw on that finger extends out. Literally, it looks like it turns into like a sword. But then it goes even beyond the length of the sword, beyond the length of a standard sword. I mean, it's literally like 6 feet long. Like just the claw is like 6 feet long. So I'm figuring that he's going to continue to extend it and just stab the boy like through the door. Eventually, he just stops advancing. We see the arm stop extending, and then it comes back to its normal shape. The claw goes back to its normal length, and then the arm kind of folds back into itself and goes back out the house. Obviously, as the viewer, you're confused. Like, what the hell's going on? Why wouldn't you just take the boy out while you had the chance? Instead, what we hear is the door gets smashed open and a creature comes through. This is the first time that we actually see a creature in all its glory. And, well, in all its glory is probably a misnomer, but it's one of the first early good shots of the thing that we see. He's a quadruped. They're not bipedal. They travel on all four legs. They can stand on their hind legs, but for the most part, they're quadrupeds. They look kind of, I don't know, I guess a chupacabra, like the traditional chupacabra look, how they're very long and lanky. They are hairy. They do have fur, which, at this point, when I see fur, I'm like, oh, well, maybe they're not aliens, because I don't think other than Attack the Block, I don't remember seeing too many furry aliens in, modern alien films. But, that's a story for another show. Okay, so from the house, we're going to go back now to the collapsed cave. And what we see is we see Thomas pulling his father out of the cave system. They're both outside. Nick is obviously unconscious. He looks bloody. It looks like he's been through war. They basically, it's the next morning now, and let's see, Joseph opens up the window of his house, sees that the sun is out, but that his brother and his father still haven't come back. So he grabs the truck, goes to find them, ends up finding them, in the middle of the road. Joseph gives them a quick, not Joseph, excuse me, Thomas gives them a quick rundown of what happened, that he fell into the crevasse. His father came to get him. They spent the night in the cave, blah, 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 blah. So they end up taking Nick Cage home. When they take him home, they take him up to the bedroom and they prop him up. He's still out cold. Now, they have no medicine, no real provisions of any kind to be able to deal with his injuries. So Thomas has the idea of going to the other farm, that he's been going to, where his little girlfriend is, because they seem like they have a lot of people living there and they probably have supplies that they might be able to spare. Joseph instantly says, no, they're not going to help us. And, Thomas doesn't understand why he thinks that. And he's like, because I wouldn't help us. And it's a valid statement, honestly. In a post-apocalyptic world, that's very valid. You never know who you can help, what their intentions are, everything else. So, yeah, Joseph is very solidly living in this world. Thomas is living in some rose-colored world of his own. So, anyway, what ends up happening is Thomas does end up going, no. They end up reloading Nick Cage's unconscious body back into the truck. This poor guy is traveling so much and doesn't even know it. They end up driving to that farm. And exactly what Joseph said would happen happens. The family who's been friendly to Thomas all this time, the mom, dad, the teenage daughter, they all like Thomas because, he helps out on the farm. He shows up every now and again, obviously with the intention of, getting attention from the teenage daughter, but, he's still doing it. So they like him. They end up telling him, I'm sorry, we can't take all three of you in. We don't have enough provisions, and we definitely don't have enough medical supplies to give you. But then they they do something that seems really, really out of place to me. They literally say Thomas can stay. And I'm like, what? What the fuck are you? You're actually going to send Joseph and his unconscious father back to their farm without any supplies, anything to help out? And you're just going to take Thomas in? Like that felt really fucking weird to me. Like, obviously the family likes Thomas, but they have no reason to send Joseph and the dad away. It's not like it's been established that they don't like each other or that they have any kind of animosity.
I felt like there was a weakness in the writing there. Like they almost wanted there to be like some confrontation or some reason for it, but they couldn't come up with like a valid reason to turn them away, and they didn't work on like the script, and they just we're just gonna say you can't stay for no real reason, because the looks on everyone's faces would indicate there's some type of like history. Maybe they've helped each other in the past, but they're running low on resources. But it didn't make sense the way that scene turned out.
Exactly, just more plot holes, more of the endless plot holes in this movie. Okay, so after they say that Thomas can stay, Joseph basically just says, okay, you stay, I'll go home, I'll take dad home. But then Thomas has a change of heart. He decides, no, I am going to go home with them. And, I'm going to go home with my brother and my father because that's where I belong. But then Joseph kind of starts giving him shit. Like, well, where are you going? You can stay. They said you could stay. Why wouldn't you want to stay here? Your girlfriend is here. They have a nice house, lots of property. They probably got lots of food. Like, it's a dream. Why would you want to come home? I don't remember what triggered the argument, but they end up getting into an argument, and literally Thomas throws his brother Joseph down to the ground and starts fucking choking him, flat out two-handed, just choking him with the intention of killing him. And then out of nowhere, Thomas like realizes what he's doing and he lets go, and then just decides to stay, changes his mind a second time, and now decides, okay, fuck it, I'm going to stay with the family. So then we see Joseph take his father back to their farm, and he's dragging his father back into the house, which is just infuriating me. I'm just so pissed off at the selfishness of the fucking brat Thomas that everything at this point is frustrating me about this movie. So they end up back at the house. Joseph secures the house, and him and his dad are safe. Now we go back to the other family farm, and we see Thomas again for the third or fourth time change his mind and say, no, you know what, I need to go home. And he basically tries to steal some pills, I don't know if they're painkillers or antibiotics or what, but basically he's trying to take some medicine out of their cabinet. Charlotte catches him, and obviously Charlotte likes him, so she doesn't really make that big a deal about it. But what she does is she ends up giving him a bottle of pills of some kind. Like I said, antibiotics, painkillers, I don't know what the fuck they are. But she ends up willingly giving him a bottle of pills. He then ends up leaving the house with the bottle of pills in his hands, and one of the farm workers, not the mom or the dad of this family, but one of the farm workers, one of the people that just was rescued, if you will, basically pulls a shotgun on the kid, on Thomas, as he's leaving the house, and says, "What do you got there? What are you taking?" And Thomas is like, "These are pills for my dad." And the guy basically thinks that he stole the pills from the farmhouse, and Thomas is pleading with him, "No, Charlotte gave them to me. You can go ask her." And the guy just decides, "I don't care," and literally takes Thomas, and they take him into the barn. And when I say they, I mean the farm workers. No actual members of the family are taking part in this debauchery. So basically, they start accusing him of stealing, and he starts talking about how he used to be a cop in the real world, and back then, when you committed a crime, there had to be punishment. And literally, the guy says that he's going to shoot his fucking foot off. Literally, he has a couple of the other farm workers hold Thomas down on the ground and then hold his leg out extended. And he's aiming for the ankle, literally about to shoot his fucking foot off. And I'm thinking, what is the end game here? Like, do you not understand that the next day when Charlotte or Charlotte's dad finds out what you did, you're fucking out of here. You can't just be judge, jury, and executioner on someone else's farm. That doesn't fucking make any sense. So again, more fucking plot holes. But just as he's about to shoot the shotgun, we see another sinkhole in the barn that they're in. And now we're starting to realize as the viewer that these creatures can burrow, and that they can burrow under people's houses. So even though they can't come out at night, they can't come out during the day because the sun hurts them, they can still work on their tunnels and everything underground, so that once the sun goes down, they can start their all-out attack. And that's exactly what we get here. We get a full-on siege of the farmhouse. Basically, all of the farm hands that were in the barn trying to punish Thomas all get sucked down into the sinkhole. We see more of the creatures start to come out. Now, this is where we start to see these creatures do the ridiculous move that Mike and I alluded to earlier. Basically, what they do is they've got elongated mouths, not quite as long as like an alligator, but slightly, maybe more like a dog or a wolf or something. And they snap their jaws very fast, comically fast, and they do it over and over again. So it's like snap, 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 snap. But it's so comically fast that you could tell it's CGI, and you're just laughing at it. Like I said, the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's different, at least. It's not something I've seen before. But then they fucking abuse it. They just use it way too much. And like Mike said earlier, and I 100% agree with them, it turns comical. I'm laughing every time they do it now. It's just hysterical to me. At this point, all the horror or sense of dread or suspense or anything else is out the window. I'm just laughing at this fucking movie at this point. Anyway, so the barn gets sieged and all of the farm hands get killed. Then as they start coming out of the sinkhole, as more creatures start coming out of the sinkhole in the barn, we see another sinkhole form in the living room inside the farmhouse. And then those creatures go and they take out the mom and the dad. Charlotte, I'll give Charlotte credit. She's able to get her hands on a shotgun as soon as she realizes that there's something in the house that shouldn't be. And she's actually able to shoot a couple of the creatures as the siege is going on. Eventually, Thomas is able to get into the house, get Charlotte out of the house, but at this point, they're the last two survivors. Literally, everybody's dead, and both the farmhouse and the barn are completely up in flames. The creatures have done exactly what they wanted. They took this farmhouse out. At this point, Thomas and Charlotte run back to the house, to their house, to Thomas's house, with the pills. He actually, I'll give Thomas that's the one thing I'll give him credit for, is that in the middle of all this siege, he still remembered to grab the pills before walking out of the house. So again, so they end up getting back to the house. Joseph lets them in. They are now both in the house. They give Nick one of the pills, and he takes it. At this point, he's now awake, but he's not up yet, but he's awake in bed, like just laying there. We see him take one of the pills, and I don't know if these pills are fucking steroids or what, because within 5 minutes, Nick is up on his feet and ready to fucking fight. He literally gets up, grabs the shotgun from Charlotte, and starts taking over, shooting the aliens as they come through the front door. Now, like I said, because of all the studying and everything that Joseph was doing, he's the first one who realizes, oh, they're burrowing under the ground. They're going to try to take us all out that way. So he sets up like a makeshift bomb where he actually has like a stick of dynamite type thing. And then he uses one of his father's cigars as a fuse, where he lights a little stub of a cigar, puts it on the fuse, and which gives them a good 5 to 10 minutes before the thing's going to go off, to give them time to jump, to either escape the house or to jump into like a bathtub or a refrigerator. They end up choosing a refrigerator. This is the biggest fucking fridge I've ever seen in my life, because it actually fits three to four people. Joseph had the plan of all four of them getting into this refrigerator so that they can, let the explosion happen and then hopefully survive it that way. Nick realizes that it's going to be too cramped with all four of them in there, and he does, the big heroic redemption thing, which he doesn't even have to do. I mean, Nick Cage is the only fucking likable character in this whole goddamn movie. Like, he's the last person who has to have a fucking redemption moment, and yet he still has it. So, yes, he ends up sacrificing himself, letting the three kids go into the refrigerator. They close it shut behind them, and then just as the aliens, monsters, whatever the fuck you want to call them, just as the creatures break through the door, literally the explosion goes off, and then we get a shot of the kids inside the refrigerator. Now, I'm not going to say that this shot was really good, but I liked it. I liked the shot of them inside of it. I don't know how realistic it is. It's probably fake as shit, but literally they're inside the refrigerator. Joseph is holding the refrigerator door closed with like a rope that he attached to it. And literally the door will flip open every now and again, just very, briefly for like an inch or two, and flames will come into the goddamn refrigerator. No one in the fridge catches on fire despite all the flames coming through the door. But regardless, I thought it was a decent little shot, something I hadn't seen before. But then when the explosion ends, this is where the camera freezes. Like, literally at the end of the explosion, the camera is just showing a static shot of the inside of the refrigerator door. Not any of the characters, literally just a static shot. It almost looks like a shot from a found footage movie, like when somebody drops the camera and the camera is just staring, at this one spot. That's what this felt like to me, and it was actually very frustrating. I'm like, why would you put that in there? This isn't a found footage movie. It's a full production film, so the camera shouldn't just fucking freeze for no reason, but it does. And like I said earlier, the audio does not freeze, so it's not a glitch. It wasn't like, a bandwidth issue with our internet. Literally, it freezes in the movie. Then the kids come out of the refrigerator. And when you see the size of the explosion, you know there's no way Nick Cage could have survived. Yet when the kids come out of the refrigerator, they see something moving under the rubble, and they assume it's their dad. They start moving the rubble to try to let whatever's under there out, and it turns out it's one of the fucking creatures. Literally, one of the creatures comes out, and he's on fire. He's literally on fire. He is, a flame. And they end up. Oh man, I skipped the critter wheel too. I forgot to mention that during the farmhouse siege, a bunch of the creatures show up in a wheel formation. Literally, they will merge, they'll join so that they can move faster. They're probably not very fast moving creatures individually, but then they literally created a critter ball and started going, and that's how they appear at the farmhouse after the siege in the barn. When they appear at the house, that's how they appear. They show up in like a ball form, which is really weird. I thought it was kind of cool, but they don't do much with it. Like, that's literally, I mean, we see it later, but when we see it later, it's so badly CGI'd that it just looks bad. But we'll get to that here in a little bit. Okay, so they escape the farmhouse. Farmhouse is on fire completely. It is just in flame. And they, the last three kids, all three of the kids in the refrigerator survived. They then jump into the truck and they start leaving the farmhouse. But then suddenly they start seeing creatures pouring out of the farmhouse, and they're all on fire. They're all literally lit up. And we see like 5 or 6 of them actually form into one of these, I say critter ball, but it's more of a wheel. Like I said, it's not a fully formed ball. It's more like just a single wheel that they form. But yeah, with the alien, I keep saying aliens. I'm convinced these things are aliens. That's why I keep saying aliens. But we never get confirmation in the movie. So don't look for confirmation in this movie. The movie's never going to tell you what these fucking things are. One of the many fucking reasons I hate this movie. Anyway. We see the ball of flaming aliens start to approach the truck, and Charlotte literally just takes the shotgun. She shoots a couple of times, but then she's out of shells. She doesn't have any more ammo. So she literally just takes the shotgun as a club and just hits the wheel. Literally, as the wheel of flaming aliens nears the truck, she hits it with the butt of the gun, and the wheel just falls apart, and all the aliens just fall over dead, which, suspension of disbelief, I guess. And then we get our little epitaph scene. It's the next morning. The kids decide to they go back to Charlotte's farm, and the farm is all burnt out. She ends up finding her father's Zippo lighter, which makes her emotional. Blah blah blah. And then the 3 kids are like, "Well, what do we do now?" And Joseph lets them know that there's 6 more farms in the valley, and that they're going to go and, they're going to go visit the next one to see if they were attacked in the night. Like, was this a coordinated effort where all of these creatures attacked all of these farmhouses on the same night? I don't know. Again, the movie doesn't tell us. Basically, the movie leaves us with the 3 kids driving into the horizon, and the movie just ends and we get credits. And I'm convinced those 3 kids are going to die the very next night. Like, how? Now they have no ammo, no weapons. They're tired. They're hungry. All of them have lost their entire families. I'm like, as the credits are rolling, I'm literally like, these 3 kids are dead. They're fucking dead the next night. I guarantee it. So that's why I'm saying, what were the stakes of this movie? This movie has no arc. It just, everyone dies and the world is fucked. Okay. Now, that can be done in a very good way. Don't get me wrong. There have been movies that leave you with that bleak ending. Most recently, When Evil Lurks. That ending is so fucking bleak, but it's so effective. Whereas this ending, they try to go for a bleak ending, but it's just corny as all hell. And literally, the 2 people in this movie that deserve to die the most are the 2 survivors of the fucking thing. So, yeah, I'm sorry, folks. I have so many problems with this movie, and I've got more problems with this movie than I even voiced on this episode, but I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing me complain, so I'm going to throw it back to Mike.
All right. Yeah, I mean, you did a thorough enough job, I guess, for this movie. There's
more than the movie deserves.
Yes,
Indeed.
exactly. Yeah, at a certain point, it's just going to start to sound like those damn monsters chattering or whatever you would refer to it as. But,
Oh God, yeah. The Muppets. I like that. The Muppet aliens. I like that.
yeah.
And again, folks, I'm saying aliens because they don't look like anything on this planet. The closest thing I could say is they look like a chupacabra, but chupacabras aren't real either. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's Arcadian. If you haven't seen it and you still want to, we at least warned you amply, I think. So that's up to you.
We did our job.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, the main show is going to be recording this coming up week, I think, as long as we don't have to make any postponements. And then The Strangers is the movie in the theater.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And
finally.
What are they classifying that as? Is this like a brand new, like, is it like a remake or reboot?
Prequel.
Oh, okay.
From what I understand, this takes place before the events of the first movie.
Oh, interesting. All right. Yep.
I mean, that's like I said, I don't watch trailers, so you guys have probably seen the trailer more than I have. But from what I read, I thought I had read that it was a prequel, that it happens before the first movie. So
yeah, I seen the trailer. It doesn't exactly indicate like that. Yeah. It just kind of gives you your Strangers setup, but
either way, I'm on board.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like we're gonna get a Strangers movie, so that's about all there is to be said at this point. But yeah, all right, cool. Well, I guess we'll go around. Besides the main show coming up being recorded, Venom, do you have anything else that's out?
Let's see. Nothing on the Creature Comforts front. We have decided that because of the death this week of, the king of B movies, Mr. Roger Corman, we have decided to do a Roger Corman film for the next episode. So the episode probably won't be recorded for the next week or two. So look for it at the end of the month. But look for us to be talking about the Wasp Woman on the next episode of Creature Comforts. One of Roger Corman's more lovable creature features. So that ought to be a fun one. And I do have one guest spot to talk about. Just last night, I recorded my guest spot on the Joe Blow Horror Show. This was the first episode of the summer series. If you guys have been with us for a few years, you know that Mike and I tend to do guest spots on the Joe Blow summer series every year. And this summer, it is the summer of the Cenobite. So I got the pleasure of talking about the original Hellraiser, my favorite of the franchise, of course, and breaking that one down, talking about all the trivia and all the subtext and everything else. So I'm not sure. I don't think that episode's going to be released anytime soon. I would say look for it sometime in June. But when I see that it's been released, I'll let you guys know again that it's available. So look out for that sometime, either the end of this month or beginning of next month. And I think that's about all I have.
Okay. How about you, Don?
Yeah. Creature Comforts. We've got our movie settled. Tentative dates and recording release are up in the air. But as Venom said, it's Roger Corman's The Wasp Woman, which is going to be a fun revisit because I haven't seen that in about a decade now. This is the off week of Horror Countdown. So latest episode is the Italian Horror Top 10. But look for a new episode coming next week. And I think that's pretty much it. I do have one more guest spot to come out, but I'll deal with that when time permits. So, yes, back to you.
All right, for me, it was just the one that I think I already mentioned last episode. I was on Cut to the Chase, where we talked American Werewolf in London and Howling, kind of a versus episode. It wasn't like a hard contest between which movie we liked better. We just kind of rated different categories of movies, but it was a good time, and there's actually talks of doing kind of like a versus series under that format, and they kind of have an idea of what they might possibly want to do next, but I'll leave those details a mystery for now, just in case, because you know, if if you're familiar with the podcasting world, so many ideas and options get tossed out as suggestions, but who knows when and if they'll actually take place. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself with announcing things. So we'll see. But for now, just check that episode out, and that's all I got. So like I said, hopefully main show's recording later this week, and then next week we'll be back with an episode on the new Strangers movie. But with that said, thanks everybody for listening. We will catch you next time. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
If I don't get Rage Cage the next time I watch a Nicolas Cage movie, I'm starting a fire.
Let Cage out of the cage is what you're saying. Peace.